right now, I'm so pleased that you are all here because this is such a necessary program. I can't remember the last time I felt that a Shul program was as important for people to hear. It has been an absolutely surreal and terrible few weeks. I speak to my family in Israel every day, and it's just, it is beyond anything anybody can imagine. When I was a kid, we lived in Israel in the Yom Kippur War, and I was talking to somebody there a few days ago and mentioned being in the bomb shelters for the Yom Kippur War. And she said to me, if you speak Hebrew, she said, Aliza, Milchemet Yom Kippur haya luxus. She says, the Yom Kippur War was a luxury. So that's what they're dealing with in Israel. But from that, we've developed this crazy imbalance in the world's perception of what is going on in the Middle East. And it's a very dangerous imbalance that is resulting in this disgusting rise in anti-Semitism, anti-Israel, anti-Zionism, call it whatever you want. And I know Tiphaera is going to talk about it. But I think a major problem with that is that today we have social media and the kids are learning their news from TikTok and Instagram and Facebook. And we ourselves as Jews, as Canadians, as people, as human beings, need to equip ourselves with enough information and connect to each other, connect to the real situation so that we have, and I hate this word, the ammunition to respond to the people who do not know what they are talking about and are only helping build world anti-Semitism. So we have an amazing speaker today. I'm going to tell you about her in 1 second. I just want to acknowledge we have Raheel Raza with us. Raheel, can you just wave so everybody sees who you are? I don't know how many of you read the National Post. She wrote an article yesterday in which she mentions Tiphaera and Tiphaera's family, and she mentions this horrible incident. It was a brilliant article, and I thank you, but I noticed your writing a week ago, last Saturday. I read this and I said to my husband, Cantor Simon, I said, you must read this woman's writing. So I thank you so very much. May you continue to write, may you continue to be heard, because you are just a gem. You are an absolute treasure to not just to the people of Israel, but to mankind, to humanity, to anyone who has eyes to read and to think. So thank you, Raheel, and we're so glad you are with us today.
Thank you. It's an honor.
But right now, I want to tell you just a tiny bit about who this wonderful Tiphaera is. I've known Tiphaera since she was in high school, and she was the cutest kid, and she grew up into the cutest young adult. But right now, she is currently in law school at the University of Windsor. She is the chair of Hasbara Canada's YP committee, and she is proud to be part of Toronto's Jewish community. She is extremely modest because when I asked her for this bio, that's all she gave me. But you will see in a moment, Tiphaera is extremely articulate. She has spoken before at the Song Shul. I think she's the youngest speaker we ever had, and we have quite an illustrious roster of speakers. She certainly held her own. But a week ago, Tiphaera and her brother were at one of the Palestinian rallies with incident. She will tell you more about it. The whole situation is just gobsmacking and horrific. Thank God. Tiphaera comes from a very special family. Her parents were among the founding members of the Song Shul. Her mom is a well-known activist here in Toronto, and my goodness, we can all take a page out of her book. So thank you, Tiphaera's parents, for setting the example. And right now, I'm going to let Tiphaera take over. So I welcome, we can applaud because I'm so full of love and gratitude to you, Tiphaera, for being with us. But here is Tiphaera Ziner-Cohen.
Wow, what an intro! Thank you so much. I'm so honored and grateful to be here. And Raheel, I'm so grateful to you for getting our story out there and for being such an incredible ally. Ally doesn't even cut it for being family, really. And I'm sorry that we're meeting under these circumstances, but there's a lot of people that I'm seeing here who I love so much, and I'm so happy that at least we're doing something together. And I think just, to start off on a really positive note, I think that has been the most incredible thing to come out of the last few weeks is to see the level of unity that we have in the community and to see the level of camaraderie. And I think that is something we really need to hold on to moving forward. But I'll get into all of that. So basically, I prepared like a little tiny, well, it's not tiny, like a 20-minute quick presentation. And then I figured we could have a discussion. And, you know, I'm sure there's a lot of people who are feeling all kinds of certain things. And I just also wanted us to have a space to be able to all share how we are feeling and how we're dealing with everything. Not a space to get into, you know, what we think needs to happen with the government in Israel or anything like that, because no one here is an expert, especially myself, but more just, you know, for us right now, what we need to, you know, we need the time and the space to be able to also talk these things through. And so thank you, Aliza and Cantor Simon, for making that space as well. So I'm just going to try sharing this, and Aliza has now seen, and Mel has now seen that I am a little bit technologically behind for my age. So just give me 1 second.
Actually, that is perhaps the most curious thing I've ever learned about you, Tiphaera.
Oh my gosh.
One of the most capable people I know about with everything. So we've discovered your kryptonite.
This is, don't tell anyone, but all of you now have the answers. So just keep it to yourself. Okay, so welcome to our discussion on the new anti-Semitism, which I don't think, my mom and I were talking about this, and anti-Semitism doesn't cut it anymore. This is just blatant Jew hatred. I think we've seen anti-Semitism kind of be just, you know, I guess it's kind of been losing its value in terms of people really understanding what this is, and this is Jew hatred. And so that is now what we are calling it for the purposes of this presentation. So I wanted to start off with a quick overview of kind of what happened last week. It's going to be really quick because I think what's more important for us to talk about is what we're going to be doing moving forward. And I say we because it's on all of us. But I did want to give everyone kind of a little bit of insight into what happened. And so I have just a quick clip that was caught by Toronto Jewish Advocacy as they were there. I did want to just say that my brother and I were not at the protest. We were not at the rally as protesters or counter protesters. This was really a situation of us getting caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. We were, you know, just walking, trying to get across. We noticed what was going on and we were like, this is not the place for us to be. And as we were trying to cross, there was, you know, the counter protesters being demonstrated out, but the entire crowd was kind of shifting towards and really shaming and yelling and throwing and things that, you know, like seem simple, like water bottles and beer cans, but they're actually very painful to have whipped at your head. And my brother and I really sensed that we were going to get caught between the protest and the counter protesters. And we assumed that if we went towards the police, we would be safe. There was also no other way to really leave at this point because a lot of the other entrances towards Nathan Phillips Square were completely either cordoned off or had demonstrators coming through from those angles as well. So we were trying to cross Queen Street from Queen Street up to Armory Road, if you know where, or Armory Avenue, if you know where that is. And this is essentially what happened. I do just want to say it's a little bit violent and there is swearing. So if you don't want to watch this part, then I totally respect that. But here's a little clip of what happened.
We can't see it.
Oh, okay. Hold on 1 second. Thank you for telling me. New share. Here we go. Okay. Share. Can you guys see it now?
Yes.
Okay.
You might want to start the clip at the beginning, though.
This is the beginning. Okay, so I'm going to stop this share and just put it back to the presentation because I don't think we want to stay on the video, or at least I don't want to. So that's kind of a quick little segment. The people that you saw in the video, I guess I should have explained this first. The person in the red and the white pants was me, and the person in the black who was being attacked was my younger brother. And essentially what had happened was when we crossed to the police, people started throwing. Can you hear me? Okay, so people started throwing things towards us, towards other people who had been caught in this bottleneck because there were people coming from different directions. You can see the police were outnumbered. You can see that the entire protest had shifted over and were really shaming counter protesters who were there. My brother and I were really just caught in it, but it doesn't matter because ultimately someone had come up. My brother was trying to simultaneously shield me from the water bottles and protect an older gentleman who did have an Israeli flag on, who was being attacked. And someone had come up from behind my brother and essentially punched him in the side of the face, and someone else came from in front and grabbed him and I don't even really know what happened. And I just went into complete panic and just wanted to get my brother, to get these guys off my brother, and said, I remember saying at one point, why did you do that? And you can see near the end that, ultimately one of the guys who was the first guy to punch him initially jumped on top of me and started punching me. And, there's a few things that I think we need to take away from this little synopsis. Like I said, we weren't protesters or counter protesters. Even if we were, it doesn't matter. This is Canada, and the fact that we are seeing this kind of violence at these sorts of rallies across the country is something that I think all Canadians of conscience need to take heed of. And we cannot allow this to happen because, one of the things that makes Canada great is the fact that we have freedom of expression and assembly. And when things turn to violence, it just destroys what this country stands for on a really fundamental level, not even getting into the Jewish part of it. Fundamentally, it could have been anyone. We had nothing on us to identify us as being Jewish or Israeli, although there is a later clip that I will show you where they were chasing us because they thought my brother was Israeli. And so this wasn't, a question of whether we were protesters or not. This was just violence at a rally, and it was not a peaceful rally. And I think that's something else that we need to be concerned about, is the way that these rallies have been construed. I totally, like I said, freedom of expression and assembly, a great feature of this country. We also have to remember that the numbers, just on a very fundamental level, are not on our side, in the sense that there are 14.7 million Jews in the world. Half of them live in Israel, and half of us are in the diaspora. And so we don't have the same numbers. And I think you could also see that in the video, just in terms of the fact that there were maybe 20, 30 counter protesters, and the entire crowd, which I cannot articulate, was overwhelming. So we really just got caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. But this was not peaceful. This was not about finding solutions. This was not about promoting peace. And I think it's really important that we recognize what is happening here, because wonderful things about Canada include our ability to express our opinions and our beliefs, but it also means that there is a check when it comes to hate speech, and these sorts of actions and these sorts of behaviors cannot be allowed to happen. And I think that's something that we all need to really just internalize for our own well-being and in terms of how we move forward. I also think the other point that I think a lot of us really need to understand is that whether you live in the diaspora or whether you live in Israel, at this point, it's irrelevant. The main thing that's happening right now is that Jews are being harassed and accosted and intimidated. And, one thing I've noticed in a lot of the videos that are going around of protests is that nobody asks if you're pro-Israel or anti-Israel or pro-Palestine or whatever it is. They ask if you're a Jew. And that's the really fundamental thing that we need to take, seriously moving forward. This doesn't really have very much to do with our positions. I think everyone knows that, you put two Jews in a room, you'll have three opinions, and nobody's more critical of Jews and the Jewish state than we are. But this is not about anything constructive. This is a real deep-seated hatred that I also think does a disservice to a very important conversation around how we move forward and how we move towards peace in Israel. And so it actually, I think, is a detriment to everyone involved, whether you're pro this or pro that. I think it hurts everybody. So with that in mind, I kind of wanted to give you guys a bit of an overview of what's been going on in my neighborhood as well, because I can't speak to everything that's been happening in Toronto. I think if you go north on Bathurst, there are people who can tell you what's happening in Thornhill. And I think if you go downtown, there are people who can tell you what's happening in Yorkville and in the downtown core. But in my neighborhood, I live in the heart of the Orthodox Jewish community, just south of Bathurst and Lawrence. And the last week was really hard because there were a lot of incidents going on. So, what happened with my brother and I on Saturday was just part of a longer string of what's been happening, really since what started in Israel started. That doesn't really make sense, but anyways, you all get the point, I hope. And so, I think, last week was really scary. We saw, I don't even want to call them pro-Palestinian protesters. I would actually just call them anti-Jewish protesters coming to the neighborhood. And, there are videos, I'm sure some of you have seen, of Orthodox Jews being harassed on the street and yelled at. And, a house was stoned, a house with a mezuzah on the door, and there were Hitler salutes. Saturday, we didn't know this at the time because this, like I said, is an Orthodox neighborhood. And so we only found out after, but synagogues around Bathurst and Lawrence were harassed. Individuals in pickup trucks with Palestinian flags drove by. And remember, we are still in a lockdown, so there are only 10 people in services at a time. And so they were really targeting synagogues as well. And this was also really hard for me as well, because on Sunday I was so upset and torn up. And one of the things that I love to do more than anything is take my dog for a walk. I know some of you have met Indigo, and he is the love of my life as far as life's concerned at this point in time. And I was told, on Sunday I was getting ready to take him for a walk, and my dad came home and had spoken with a few police officers as he was driving home, and they had basically told him, please just keep close to home, because we've had 8 incidents of, houses with mezuzahs being stoned and people harassed as they walk. And a good friend of mine, her and her husband were out with their baby and were told the same thing. So there was a huge police presence. I don't even need to get into all the details of things that were happening. Another friend was accosted in front of her home with her children. And by Monday and Tuesday over Shavuos, there was a huge influx of police officers in the neighborhood keeping tabs. There was a patrol outside of the Jewish cemeteries on Roselawn to make sure that there was no vandalism. And again, no one asked anybody who they harassed or intimidated or accosted if they were pro, anti, anything. It was really a question of seeing visibly Jewish individuals and just using them as a vessel to express whatever anger or hatred they have towards Jews or whatever else. And so I think what's really important for us to try to understand is why this is happening right now. I think for a lot of younger people in the audience, I think everyone can speak to what we were seeing on social media right before this started happening. The amount of misinformation and lies and distortions and just the most awful characterizations of Israel and by extension, the Jewish people were all over Instagram and TikTok and Snapchat and literally you name it, it's there. And there is a correlation between what we saw online and the hate crimes that are occurring in the city and across North America and across Europe. I think if you ask me, posts that include language including settler or settler colonizer or occupier or white supremacist, these are not only inaccurate, and I'm sure you can hear how irritated I'm getting just saying it, they're not only inaccurate, they not only serve to dehumanize Israel, but they serve to dehumanize Jews. Because ultimately, the majority of Israel is Jews, and there's no distinction between the Jews outside of Israel and the Jews inside of Israel. And so what's happening with this language is that it's allowing the normalization and the justification and the legitimization of very hateful rhetoric and very hateful actions. And I think it's interesting because I recently was thinking about, I always like to think about my grandparents and what they thought of anti-Semitism before the Holocaust in Hungary. And I think there's a very close parallel to be made between the message. The medium might have changed, the message is the same. And so the way in which Jews are being dehumanized, the avenue and the ways in which it might be happening are different. You know, that's happening via social media, and it's happening via really biased and misinformed journalism. But at the same time, that kind of propaganda was just spread through a different medium before the Holocaust in Europe. And so I know it's serious when you make that kind of comparison, but that really is the comparison that I would make in terms of the way that these sorts of stereotypes are being shared might be different, but the underlying theme, which is to dehumanize Jews, is the same. And again, the same thing can be said when you call Israel a settler colonial project or a racist endeavor, or I've seen a lot of posts that say this isn't complicated, it's not a conflict, there are no two sides. These are all tools, I really believe, to try and silence and intimidate and harass Jews for having a connection to Israel. And I also think, you know, when Jews do stand up, if they're public online, I think there's also been a huge amount of backlash and bullying and hate speech that goes on against them as well. And so these are really big problems to deal with, but ultimately the purpose of these sorts of actions is the same, and it's really just to silence us and to intimidate us and to keep us from saying that, you know, what's going on is being misreported and is not accurate and our message is not being heard. So let's just go to correcting a few misconceptions. I'm sure I'm running over, so I'm going to try to be quick. But basically,
you are not running over. We're all
okay,
good.
Perfect. So I don't want to get into any sort of, you know, policy sort of discussions on this because we don't have that much time, and I more so want to hear what you guys have to think of everything. But I want to get into a few basic truths that are at the core of my identity, and I think should be, I mean, that's a lot to say, but should be at the core of yours as well. And so these are just a few messages that I think we all need to kind of internalize and think about, and just really take, I guess, just take comfort in knowing that this is our truth. So the first, Zionism is an integral part of Jewish identity. I think we've seen the way that this word is being co-opted and defined by people who are not us. And I think it's really important that we are the ones to define our understanding of what this is and what it means to us. Zionism is the Jewish people's right to self-determination in our ancestral homeland, and that is not in and of itself a political statement. And you shouldn't feel bad for saying that you are a Zionist, because all it means is that you believe in our right to self-determination in our ancestral homeland. That does not negate or delegitimize anybody else's claim or desire to self-determination. It's just our right and belief to self-determination in our ancestral homeland. And I put this at the bottom because this Jewish safety and Palestinian self-determination, as well as Palestinian safety and Jewish self-determination, are not mutually exclusive, because I do think, and I know that there are good people, and I'm very lucky because I had a really long conversation with the girl I've actually grown closest to over my first year of law school, who is Palestinian. And for them, this is also heartbreaking to see the way that anti-Semitism is, you know, coming to define their movement, and they don't want it either. And so I think we need to also know that there are people who don't want this to be the narrative that is being told on the other side, so to speak, either. And so, you know, there is room for us to meet in the middle and work on that. But mainly the point is just to say that this is an integral part of our identity, and no one should make you feel bad about that. Why is Zionism integral to Judaism, our culture, our religious practice, our identity? It all revolves around our connection to this land. And I think we've seen a passive forms of Zionism throughout our 2,000 years in exile. We pray towards Jerusalem. So many of our cultural and our religious holidays revolve around our connection to this land. You know, so many elements of this practice revolve around the relationship. Half of the 613 mitzvot are directly connected to Israel and the land and the temple. But more so than just that, you know, in a sense, Judaism is also a land-based religion, and we have a stewardship of this land as well. And so no one, you know, I can't articulate it enough, but no one should make you feel bad for having this relationship and loving this land. And it doesn't mean you're a racist or a white supremacist or a settler colonial. I can't even say the word, because you are the only one who gets to define this narrative for yourself. And these are the messages that I really internalize and take heed because it's at the core of who I am. So I'm kind of sharing my inside secrets. And I think the other point, so that's passive Zionism, is, you know, our religious identity and our religious connection to the land, but also active Zionism. And Theodore Herzl may have popularized our yearning to return home, but Zionism did not start with Herzl. And, you know, there have been movements throughout our exile to return home. And we've also seen some of our greatest sages also make that a really important part of their identity in moving home. And Rambam moved home, and there are so many, you know, we have the history, and we have the culture, and we have the identity, and we have the archaeology, and there are so many different ways in which we can articulate our relationship and connection. So don't think it just started in the 19th century. I think it's a really simplified way of bad faith actors to kind of turn it into a movement of colonialism, and that is not what it is. In fact, if you ask me, I think Zionism is the most successful decolonization movement in modern history. At my law school, we actually have a course that we have to take. It's called Indigenous Legal Orders, and it's got its ups and downs. One of the ups is that you get the chance to learn about like Indigenous legal traditions and Indigenous cultures in Canada. And one thing that became very clear to me over the duration of that course is that in the same way that Indigenous nations in Canada, no amount of time would make them forget or neglect their relationship to this land. The same goes for the Jewish people. And so really what we need to take heed in is that this is where we are Indigenous too. And ultimately, no amount of time and no amount of experience in the diaspora will make us neglect or negate that relationship and that connection. And in the same way, you wouldn't expect somebody who is an Indigenous person of Canada to do that, you know, and to negate that part of their identity. You shouldn't expect Jewish people to either. Anyways, so as I move forward, what I really have to say is that, and these are really the things that are at the core of who I am. Israel's right to exist is my right to exist, and I think with every passing day, we see that more and more. I saw a really interesting tweet by Dr. Einat Wilf, and I can't remember it off the top of my head, but basically the point of it was, you know, people are saying that hatred of Israel is being used to delegitimize and be hateful towards Jewish people in the diaspora. I also think that it's also an excuse, and people are using Israel to really just to really just express the hatred and animosity that they have towards Jews anyways. And that's what anti-Semitism does. It mutates. It's a virus that, takes on whatever form it needs to throughout history. So ultimately, the point is that asking Jewish people to negate or undermine or disregard their connection to Israel is a direct attack on our Jewish identity, and being told to neglect or negate a part of our religious identity is something that I don't think any other minority would be okay with, and you shouldn't be okay with it either. And when people say that they're not anti-Semitic and they're just anti-Zionist, which I think we're seeing a lot of right now, what they mean is that they respect Jews without power. And when they say something like that, they fundamentally have to ignore the fact that 90+% of the Jewish community in Canada and in the States, in wherever you go or outside of Israel, they believe in Zionism. They believe that Jews have the right to self-determination in their homeland. It ignores the fact that nearly half of the global Jewish population lives in Israel. It ignores, our indigenous identity, and it ignores basically our entire history. It negates our entire history. It negates who we are. I do want to say that there are a lot of people where Zionism has a different meaning. And it's important for us to also be able to just know that oftentimes they really are just anti-Semitic when they use anti-Zionism, but sometimes, and it's, I think, more the exception than the rule, it really comes from a place of whatever their experience has been and whatever their background is and whatever they've been raised on. And that's why it's so important for you to be able to explain what Zionism is to you, because that's your truth and that's your experience. And I think right now in this very sensitive culture, I think that's something that, no one can take away from you, and no one should be allowed to take away from you either. So this is the most important part of this presentation, which is what can we do? I think the main thing for us to take away is that every single one of us has a skill or a talent or a something that we can be using right now, and we have to be using it right now. If you're good with content creation online, or if you're good at writing, or if you're good at whatever else it is, really, I've heard people say this before, and I always thought it was kind of silly, but it's not silly, because right now it's all hands on deck. Someone else will do it, does not apply in this situation. Every single one of us has a responsibility to ensure that what we're seeing is that this Jew hatred is it cannot be allowed. It cannot be okay. So the other thing I would say is, now is the time to get involved in the community. And like I started with, that has been such a beautiful part of everything, is that there is so much unity. But be a part of it. I love, as I said earlier, I saw a meme earlier that was on one of these Jewish meme accounts on Instagram, and it was someone's Instagram home feed and all of the different blue squares from the campaign on Friday. And the meme basically just said they couldn't, Jews, we couldn't even pick the same color blue because all of them were different shades of blue, which is both a beautiful part about us and also our worst feature sometimes. And so, I think use your skill and get behind what you can get behind and do, because we all have something to do and we can all do it, and we have to, because nobody else is going to. And in honor of any younger or you're all young, but younger audience members who might be in university, this is a message, because just know that whatever you're seeing right now happening, this is what Jewish students on campuses, university and college have been dealing with for the last, I can't speak to the last 20 years personally, because I'm only 25, so I was 5 at that point, but I know, listening to my parents and growing up with them, that this has been a problem for a long time. But really just know that what you're seeing now is what Jewish students have been dealing with for a really long time. And that would be the thing that I'm most scared of as students go back to school next year. Universities really are the breeding grounds for a lot of the rhetoric and hateful characterizations that are going on right now. And whatever is happening now will continue to happen on university campuses, and we cannot let that happen. And, you know, the students are really, we need all hands on deck. If you have influence to get, and I'm so going with that, if you have influence to get the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism adopted at institutions, I think the last 2 weeks have shown us exactly why it's so necessary, because it really does distinguish when anti-Zionism becomes anti-Semitism, and it makes very clear that legitimate criticism of Israel, the same way we criticize Canada, is fine and okay, and no one's saying it's anti-Semitic, but it does very often and quickly descend into anti-Semitism. And that also takes away from, you know, what we need to be focusing on, which is trying to find peace for our people and for, you know, the world and whatever else. But really, Israelis and Palestinians don't deserve to live with this kind of situation. And so we really, anyway, I'm getting off point, but let me just continue. So I've set some tips for me to leave with all of you. When it comes to social media, set boundaries. You don't need to respond or engage unless you want to. And this has been something that's been really big in my house, because believe me, there is a lot of want to respond, and there has been a lot of responding, but you don't have to if you don't want to, and you're not going to win everybody over. Don't try. I really don't even, you know, I see so much hateful rhetoric, and oftentimes you won't be able to get through, but, you know, amplify the positives that are going on. And there are so many positives that are happening. I think 40 years ago, if someone had said that the flag of Israel will be flying over all of these European capitals, we would have laughed. And so, you know, and I think there's beautiful things happening in Israel, and we're seeing so many people coming together for peace and for prosperity and for everything good. And we need to be really amplifying those kinds of stories, because no one needs any more bad news, you know. So the other thing I would say is that the burden of proof, as a law student, the only thing I would say, the burden of proof is not on you. And if somebody is going to use words like apartheid or genocide or ethnic cleansing, you are entitled to ask them exactly what it is they mean. Because oftentimes, if you press them on it, they have no idea what they're saying. And they realize, I mean, they might not even want to realize it, because I think people are really just resistant to the truth in a lot of respects. But if you push back on it, you'll realize that there's, you know, it's just not accurate, and they'll realize it too, or hopefully they will. Don't negate your identity for their comfort. You cannot be expected to turn back or reject an integral part of who you are. This is an attack on Jews, both in Israel and in the diaspora. I don't know if you guys saw, but Sarah Silverman put out a tweet to one of the anti-Semitic attacks that happened in the SED and in the States, and basically just said, you know, Jews in the diaspora are not Israel. We need allies, or something like that. And frankly, they don't care. They don't ask you. And, you know, turning around and saying I'm a pig, but I have no tail is not going to save you. So don't try and make the point that you're not, you know, we are Jews, and this is an attack on Jews. And don't try and, you know, make yourself more accommodating for anybody else either. And on that same note, I would say, don't let others tell you what is and is not anti-Semitic. I see this a lot right now, online a lot right now. I see a lot of fringe organizations trying to say anti-Zionism is not anti-Semitism, or, you know, Palestinians have the right to define anti-Semitism, or some really crazy things. You are the only person who is entitled to say what is and is not anti-Semitic. And even within our community, you know, we see a lot of the time that there's a lot of, it just depends on a person's comfort, but no one is allowed to tell you. And that is the point to take away. No one who is not Jewish especially should be telling you what is and is not anti-Semitic. And you're well within your rights to say that, just from where I stand. And I'm not on the same level as Natan Sharansky, but Natan Sharansky really is a helpful needier when it comes to how to distinguish between what is legitimate criticism of Israel and what is just straight up anti-Semitism. And I think the beautiful thing is that a lot of Natan Sharansky's thoughts on these three elements were kind of played a big role in the development of the IHRA definition. And so just because I'm using this does not mean that this one should be chosen, whatever, just Natan, just great explanation. So the 3Ds, delegitimization of Israel, denying the Jewish people's right to self-determination, and claiming that the existence of Israel is itself a racist end of war. That is anti-Semitism. That is not legitimate criticism. Demonization of Israel, criticism that uses metaphors, images, or rhetoric that implies that Jews or Israel, I can't see what the rest of my screen is saying, but are evil essentially. And I think what you're seeing a lot of right now is very much demonization in what you see online. And like I said, the language earlier, that is an attempt to dehumanize us as individuals, as people. And I could see the effect of it in the crowd when, you know, people saw me and this guy, we made eye contact and it just did not matter. He didn't care because he didn't see me as a person. And that's why this is so dangerous, because people forget that, you know, we're people and they're people. And at the end of the day, we're all human. And subjecting Israel to double standards. I think we're seeing a lot of this right now as well. And there is a different moral standard for Jews in Israel compared to the rest of the world. I think a perfect little microcosmic example of this can be seen in terms of the Pakistani foreign minister's interview on CNN. And luckily there was, I forget her name and I apologize, but the journalist, who was great, you know, really pushed back and was like, you know, this is anti-Semitic. But the bigger point to be made, if you watch the full interview, is that he starts off using anti-Semitic canards about Israel and about the Jewish people. But when the journalist follows up with questions on the Uyghur genocide in China, he just completely deflects and, you know, ultimately says it's nothing to do with us, which is funny because if you saw today, an article just came out about how Pakistan has actually been working with China and suppressing the Uyghurs who escaped to Pakistan. So I think a lot of the time, the loudest voices also have the biggest skeletons in their closet. And it's not whataboutism when you call them on it. It's a question of consistency. Because if this is about human rights and about ensuring, you know, a good quality of life and what have you, I think you are allowed to ask and allowed to know what these individuals think when it comes to other countries. Because if there is an obsessive overemphasis on Israel, which I think you also see, for example, at the UN, that is not about improving anything. That is not about improving Palestinian lives. That is simply about targeting Jews and targeting Israel as the collective Jew among the nation. So your homework is to help get the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism adopted wherever you are. If it's on a university campus, please reach out. I have a lot of great resources on that. If it's in your companies and you are a multi-millionaire on this call, I don't know who you are, but if you're here and you can get it adopted at your company, get it adopted. I think now is the time for people to really understand the difference between legitimate criticism of Israel and anti-Semitism, because what happens online has an impact in person, and we are being impacted. It's a cause and effect. There's a lot of hate online, and that's the cause. The effect is that we are getting hurt and we are scared, and none of us should be scared. You know, if you have a Magen David, I highly recommend you put it on wherever you can, because we're not hiding, we're not scared. And so on that note, I did want to show a final clip, which is another clip from what happened to my brother and I, but I really just think it just goes to show just the kind of, you know, basically If you ever watch the Hulk, when he turns into the Hulk and he grows 3 sizes, that's essentially what happened with my brother. So the sentiment that he expresses in this video is the sentiment that I want us all to take, which is back up, because we are very peaceful people, and we love and we want peace. But if you attack and you demonize and you harass Jews, there will be consequences. And I say that because I know everyone here on this call is going to do what they can to ensure that there are consequences. So here is just a quick little clip of my brother, and again, content warning, but it is a really good one. Let me just make sure, hold on before I restart it, because I need to make sure that the right screen is sharing, because I'm really bad at this, as we know now.
No, you have improved tremendously in just half an hour.
Thank you very much for saying so. Okay, here we go. So share. Okay, I just want to go back to the beginning, so I'm just going to refresh it. And where's the sound? Oh my gosh, sorry guys, this is really, hello? Okay, well, I don't know if you'll be able to hear it. I hope you can, if need be. I don't know. Okay, I don't know why it's not working, but essentially this was when my brother and I were trying to leave, and my brother was trying to get me, we're in the corner when we were trying to leave, and that guy saw my brother and was like, he's Israeli, I see him. And they tried to essentially I don't know what they were trying to do on the street, actually. I really don't, but they couldn't get to us and they were really upset about it. So this is when we were trying to leave, and I really wish the sound would work, because then you could hear how great my brother was, because he really just turned around and said, back up, before the police had a chance to get there. And so that was pretty much him, like, defending my honor. I guess you could say. I don't really know how else to put it, but it really was a question of this guy seeing him and saying, he's Israeli, I see him, and then just completely going after us. So luckily we made it home and we're in one piece. And so that's our harrowing journey. And this was way longer than I was expecting, because I did want us to just chat so we can keep chatting, but there's my spiel for all of you, and thank you for listening.
Oh, Tiphaera, my goodness, we need to take you out of law school and send you on the speaking circuit at every university campus in North America, because people need to hear from you. People need to hear from you, and people need to be ignited to speak up and to speak out and to do things. We're going to open up to questions. It's possible people have been writing questions, and I apologize, I have not been keeping my eye on the chat. But beginning now, if you have a question, please type it right in. If you don't feel comfortable typing, you could try waving your hand in front of your camera and I'll call on you. But the one thing that I have kept on wondering while we wait for people to ask some questions, I'm just wondering about the police here in Toronto. When that was all happening, how did you feel the police's attitude was?
It was honestly wild, because at first we really thought that would be the safest way to go, right? It was a question of where we were going to get caught, in the big crowd or the little crowd. And as we crossed, the bottles were being thrown at police officers, the same way they were being thrown at us. And they really, at one point, I honestly don't even remember when, but at some point, an officer turned to me and was like, we really just need you to get out, because we can't protect you, because there's more of them than there are of us. And that was really terrifying. And when we by the time when we got to the intersection of Armory and University, I asked if there was an officer there, and I asked if they could walk us back to the car. And they couldn't, because there just weren't enough people. So it was a question of whether we wanted to wait with the officer until things calmed down, or just get to the car and get home. And so that's really what we did. But there was the clips that I showed you only showed one of the attacks, because there were actually two. And as my brother and I walked towards Armory, somebody literally dove through 3 cops and there was nothing said, you know, we didn't have anything on us, and just went for my brother and like punched him right in the face, and dove through 3 cops. So he was arrested, but
Okay.
it was interesting because JJ, my brother, my hero, was also kind of playing like police and coordinator, because he was really trying to get people's attention. And I know you couldn't hear the sound, but in that video, like, he's really trying to put some distance between me and those guys who were trying to get to us. So, you know, that was definitely disappointing. But I think the bigger thing, it's not even just about just our community, even though our community is 100% being disproportionately impacted, but all Canadians of conscience need to know that this rallying that's going on every week is not safe. I know we're still in a pandemic, but forget about that. It's just not safe, because there's no peaceful intent. And I hate to generalize, because I don't think that's everyone. But it is becoming a really dangerous cesspool of hate that the police can't really control.
Yeah. There's a conversation, whoa, there's a lot going on, and they're all signed by Tiphaera. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I have many talents, one of which is typing without using my hands, or
It's
my brother
astounding.
using my Zoom.
It is astounding. Okay, I'm trying to read this for you, but it's oh goodness. Okay, it says Facebook has been stopping videos on the Everything Jewish Toronto site from viewing anti-Israeli videos by pro-Palestinian protesters. What? Others too have told me that they too get cut off, and it blacks out when we try and see the violence towards Jews. It's like we've been hacked online on Facebook. Oh my goodness. I did not know this. Wait,
I will say, what I can tell you about social media is that, first of all, there is a concerted campaign, and this is part of the problem that I don't think we even really fully comprehend. There is a concerted campaign by anti-Israel. I don't say pro-Palestinian, because I think there's a difference. By anti-Israel, I don't even know how to explain it. Individuals, collective groups, I don't know, who really like a 50 Cent army, like, who really sit on their computers, mass reporting and mass targeting Jewish and pro-Israel content. And I've seen it happening on TikTok, TikTok, I can't even, that's just a cesspool, and like, just no one should be on there for a whole plethora of reasons. But Instagram, it's been happening, Facebook, it's been happening, Twitter, it's been happening, and it's a really huge problem. And I think I'll just put in a shameless little plug. I think having things like Bill C-10 pass are going to be really bad for things like that. So I'm just getting that in there. You should all not let that happen either, because that'll make this even worse. But there is a concerted campaign going on. And the problem is also that algorithms really are amplifying really terrible misinformation as well. And I'm speechless about it. And all I can say is I'm, to be honest, and I'm sure someone will give me a hard time for this later on, but I'm just grateful that there are people like Ted Cruz in the States who are making a fuss about this with Facebook itself, because it's out of control. And Jews and pro-Israel voices are 100% being silenced. There was a story about it on Fox last week. Now I sound like a huge Republican, but anyway.
Doesn't matter what you sound like. You're pro-Israel and you're setting the record straight. Somebody just asked me a question. She says she doesn't want her name revealed. Wait a second. Why doesn't this scroll properly? For people in university, if you could give one piece of advice, what would it be? What should we say?
So the first thing I would tell you to do is get in touch with Daniel Corin and Hasbara Fellowships. And I'm not trying to be just like a shameless plug, even though I'm also shamelessly plugging, but everything that I am saying tonight is also, I'm very lucky because I have the family that I do and the parents that I do. But Hasbara really did give me a lot of tools and resources and the confidence to speak the way that I feel and the way that I think is being neglected by these universities. The other thing that I would say most importantly is that you are not alone on university campuses. There is a really nasty group of bad faith actors who are really abusing Jewish university students. And if you are one of those students and you happen to be here, please message me, because literally there's not a group that I care more about when it comes to this than university students. Jewish university and college students did not sign up to be to have to justify their existence. So it's a huge responsibility to take on. And you're not alone in doing it. And there are people who want to help you. And I know that the community wants to help. And so I would definitely reach out to Hasbara, because I can't even begin to tell you how much they've meant to me. So, and reach out to me as well if you want.
Excellent. And someone asks, do you feel supported by our police?
Yes, I will say that the police who came to the house later on were really upset about what had happened. And I do sincerely believe that they are taking this very, very seriously. And I know that there's been a lot of pressure from the community. And so, you know, we're on our own, but we're not on our own. You know, we have each other, and we do have people who want to help us and who hear us. Like I said, we don't really have the numbers necessarily, but we do have the truth. And the truth is not always popular, and what's popular is not always the truth. But like, honestly, I really, listen, like, I ebb and flow. I have really low points where I'm just devastated and I'm like, the numbers aren't on our side, and there's a lot against us. But we can't afford to think like that right now. You know, like, I really think that the only thing to keep that from happening is each of us doing what we can to keep it from happening. And so, yeah.
Okay, agreed. I'm looking at the clock and I feel terrible. I'm only now noticing there's like a whole discussion going on here in the chat, and I'm sorry, I've been listening to you without even glancing, and I, as the person running this program, boy, I sure let it run away because I did not even notice. I hope the other people have been reading this. I see we have Robin Martin here and Daniel Korn here. We have some wonderfully influential people who are on our side, who are doing what they can, really doing what they can. I want you to know we are so very grateful to you. And I think just by virtue of the fact that the rest of you are here, it shows that you are interested in getting the information you need to be armed in discussions, because it starts with discussions, and that is how we educate the others, the people who are just springing. I wish there were a magic wand that we could just wave and people's eyes would be looking correctly. I'm going to ask one more. Oh goodness, every time I scroll, it's like 22 more messages. Should we get Army patrols to assist Toronto police or plainclothes officers? That is a question.
I do think that, as scared and neurotic as we we cannot be that's scared. We can't. I refuse it, you know, like, and if you ask me, I think, like I said before, if you have a Magen David, I would put it on. And I just think that now, like, I've always believed that the only antidote to darkness is sunlight. And by that, I mean, you really, like, the only antidote to anti-Semitism is leaning into to your Judaism in whatever way that feels most comfortable to you. If it's, you know, studying an hour a week or davening, or doing a mitzvot, or like whatever it is. But we cannot be scared, because I think they thrive off of us being scared. And, you know, we're not doing it. We are not doing it. We are not Jews with trembling knees. Okay. We're not doing it. There you go.
Yeah, there you go. Someone asks, any idea why you feel you and your brother were targeted?
JJ and I both have a couple of theories. I'm not 100% sure. Part of me genuinely, like I don't know how many of you guys know JJ, but he is like, he could pass for Palestinian or Israeli, ethnically ambiguous. I think, to be honest, at first, and this will sound crazy, but I think they thought he was there to support, and we really were just trying to get through, and then we crossed the barricade, and I think they were really pissed off. Maybe, I don't know. We didn't have any flags on us. I know that later on, that clip that I showed you, that the sound didn't work. They were saying, you know, he's Israeli, I see him. So maybe they thought he was Israeli. I don't know. I also just think that there's a frenzy of hate that's just being like conditioned online, and I think innocent bystanders, like really, like, you know, I have a friend who lives at Yonge and Charles. He's Israeli, moved here with his girlfriend, and they were out walking their dog that night and were just harassed, chased down the street back to their condo, and they were speaking Hebrew, and that's the only explanation I can think of. So it's like it's almost random, but I kind of call it walking while Jewish, but that might be a little bit loaded. So
Yeah. Look, I wish we had another hour to continue this. I am so grateful. On behalf of the Song Shul, I thank you. On behalf of myself, I thank you, Tiphaera. You know how I feel about you. You are just one of those exceptional people. You are making a mark in this world, and you will continue to do so. And I said that when you were in high school. Really, honestly, just keep doing what you're doing. And thank you so much. Thank you to everyone else who joined us today. Continue to speak out. Don't let your kids be sucked in to the wrong ideas. Just don't let them
don't let it
that.
happen. If you need to, please send them to me. I would love to speak to them. But thank you, Aliza, for making this space. Thank you, everyone who came.
And as long as Tiphaera has offered to be connected, honestly, if you have kids or grandchildren and you would like them connected, send me an email and I will share with you Tiphaera's email and connect you. It is truly important. In the meantime, look, Am Yisrael Chai, we should only have peace. We should have peace for Israel and for Klal Yisrael and for all the Jews all over the world and for all people all over the world. It should just be a peaceful, peaceful time and a peaceful place. And Corona should be finished so we could all be together in person. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Tiphaera, a million thanks.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Have a good night, everyone. Be safe. Be safe. Be safe.
Thank you so much for listening to me. I truly appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Great job, Tiphaera.
Thank you.